Today we're diving into the game that virtually everybody knows who have a slight interest in computer games, that is. It is a game that has spawned countless of other titles within itself, and a game that remains one of the most popular RTS experiences in the world today. We are talking about a game whose rich lore has inspired numerous books and even laid the foundation of the greatest MMORPG ever. A game that will never become outdated and will never be forgotten. Warcraft 3.
We never paid any heed to the ancient prophecies. Like fools, we clung to the old hatreds. And fought as we had for generations. Until the day the sky rained fire, and the new enemy came among us. We stand now upon the brink of destruction, for the reign of chaos has come at last.
I think the first game that I ever played was actually Warcraft 3. My earliest memory of it dates back to when I was about 5 or 6 years old. I was at the only computer club in a city where my uncle worked, and me and my brother spent countless hours there playing all sorts of games, mostly CS 1.6, Age of Empires, Halo, Quake, and of course Warcraft 3. Since my uncle worked there, we could play for free on any PCs that weren't already taken. We would often play together or even against adults. There was one guy who was about 16 to 18 years old, determined to beat us preschoolers in 1v3 match of Warcraft 3. We found such idea ridiculous as how one can beat 3, so naturally, we agreed to the challenge. To make things fair, he made us give him a handicap of 50%, meaning our units of each of us had twice less health than it usually supposed to be. At the time, I didn't fully understand how handicaps worked, and I couldn't figure out why our units were dropping so quickly, or why they had so little health. That guy was absolutely crushing us, cackling and laughing every single time he would wipe out our heroes with Coil and Nova combo. After all of this suffering, we actually managed to win, not by defeating his army and destroying his base. No, his time just ran out and he was forced to leave the game. His computer just literally shut down, and this way, we won. But Warcraft 3 wasn't just an RTS game for us, and it wasn't about competitive aspect of it. It was about the magical world it opened up to us. I still remember playing with my brothers in a yard. Controlling units and heroes wasn't enough for us, but I'm lying, maybe it wasn't. It's just our parents wouldn't let us and would tell us go outside. But anyway, we had to step into their shoes, like in our own adventures, and play out the roles of heroes. And it wasn't just about performing different type of skills and magics from the world. We would try to come up with our own spells in our own stories. We spent like hours crafting our little quests, pretending to defend an imaginary tree of life from a wave of enemies, which to be honest was just random stuff we found laying around. So sometimes we would even destroy an ant's nets like we were Archimons. Anyway, let's move on. How did the Warcraft 3 actually happen to be? Back in 1992, the founders of Blizzard, Mark Morhaime, Frank Pierce, and Alan Adham first played Dune 2 and were instantly hooked. Inspired by its revolutionary RTS mechanics, they decided to create a game with similar system of development and interaction. Another key figure in the story was Patrick Viat, Blizzard's former vice president, who played a central role in the game development. It's kind of ironic that while Blizzard still exists today and even thrives in greedy monetization tactics and not game development, none of these original founders are part of the company anymore. By the time Doom 2 was released, Blizzard had already put out two cult classics, The Lost Vikings and Rock'n'Roll Racing. So they weren't exactly unknown, but they hadn't yet reached their iconic status. Initially, they wanted their next big game to be set in Warhammer universe, which had been hugely popular for years, but fearing legal complications with the right holders, they scrapped that idea basically, and instead, they decided to create their own original universe. While Warcraft became a unique world on its own, it was clearly inspired by classics like Dungeons & Dragons and Lord of the Rings series. In 1994, Blizzard released the first game in Warcraft universe, Warcraft Orcs and Humans. This is where the Kingdom of Azeroth first appeared, and where the entire Warcraft saga began. The opening of the portal between Azeroth and Draenor, sparking the war between humans and orcs. If you didn't know, the 2016 Warcraft movie was actually based on the events of this very first game. I personally loved the film, and though it's a shame they don't seem to be planning on a sequel, from the very beginning Blizzard focused on not just game mechanics but also on crafting a strong immersive storyline. Little did they know they were creating a universe that would become as beloved and influential as Warhammer and Lord of the Rings. The first Warcraft game borrowed a lot from Dune 2 system, building units from the weakest to the strongest, a hierarchical structure for constructing buildings, and the collection of two key resources, wood and gold. But it introduced some fresh elements like two separate campaigns for humans and orcs, and more varied missions objectives beyond just build a base and destroy the enemy. Plus, it featured a multiplayer mode, making it the first RTS in the world to offer networked multiplayer. You can imagine how much of a big deal they used to be. The wild success of the first game pushed Blizzard to dive straight into the sequel. Just a year later, in 1995, they released Warcraft 2 Tides of Darkness. While it stuck to the 2D format of the original, Warcraft 2 significantly refined the graphics and added a ton of tactical innovations. Now, you had an air unit and naval units, and a new resource, oil, was introduced, essential for building ships. The game also added commands for defense, patrolling, and you could now select up to 9 units at once. It was a huge deal back then. Units were specialized for targeting either air or ground enemies, and many had special abilities or spells. Another major innovation was the introduction of the Fog of War, a feature where you could only see parts of the map that your units had explored or currently watching. This concept became a standard in RTS games from that point forward. Building upgrades were also introduced, and the multiplayer mod was expanded to support up to 8 players. The plot of Warcraft 2 picked up right where the first game left off. In the canonical storyline, the humans lost to the orcs and fled to the neighboring land of Lordaeron, where they formed an alliance with the dwarves and elves. But the orcs soon followed, launching an attacks on Lordaeron and triggering a new brutal battle of these lands. What made Warcraft 2 stand out was its complex storytelling. The main narrative wasn't just simple good against evil tale, it was filled with internal conflicts within both factions, adding layers of depth and ambiguity. The success of Warcraft 2 was even greater than the first, capturing Blizzard into the same league as industry giants like LucasArts and Westwood Studios. But here's where Blizzard made an interesting move. Instead of immediately jumping into Warcraft 3, they decided to take a break from the series and explore other projects. And well, we all know what came next. Diablo and StarCraft, two games that would redefine not just Blizzard's legacy, but the entire gaming industry. Unfortunately, I've never played StarCraft, except for one occasion. Back in my school days, I was talking with my friends about games, about Warcraft, and they were saying that StarCraft is harder. But I was saying, nope, you're wrong. It's Warcraft. Warcraft is better, it's harder, and everything. I was a sneaky guy. I was a sneaky rat guy, you know. My friend decided, like, okay, let's play 1v1 just to, you know, to see, like, for example, I coming from Warcraft 3 and you always play StarCraft, and we'll play 1v1 and we'll see how it goes, basically, right? He was pretty good. Out of all my school friends, as far as I knew, he was the best at StarCraft. So we decided to play our first game, and he did not take me seriously. In a matter of fact, I looked up strategies on the internet and how the factions worked, and I knew that Protosses had a weakness. If you destroy their pylons, their energy would shut down and they wouldn't be able to build units. And I chose the faction that had one of the best, in my opinion. I think I couldn't play with other factions. Yeah, I couldn't play with other factions. I played tyrants, the humans basically, and I would just spam the very first unit, the Marines ones, and I would just rush him down. And he was so surprised seeing that I would destroy the pylons first instead of other buildings, because he wasn't like showing a sweat even though I was rushing him. Maybe he was worried a little bit, but he thought to himself, there is no way he's going to destroy the pylons. Too bad. And you know what? After defeating him, he felt so bad. He was asking me to play 1v1 again, but I never did. Now that we had a small lyric digression, let's go back to the history. Back in those years, developers had no idea what the game industry was supposed to look like. They didn't know which genres would break the most cash or which ones would flop. Unlike companies like Ubisoft today, who just copy-paste the same game with new numbers and titles, Blizzard and others were experimenting, pouring their souls into their project. There was no activist breathing down developers' necks about common sense and what political agenda is there nowadays, and no one really knew what players wanted next. This unpredictability led to amazing results, games that were wildly different from one another. The industry wasn't just evolving graphically, it was growing in depth. Just look at the games that came out in 1998 and 1999. Half-Life, StarCraft, Fallout, Baldur's Gate, Resident Evil, Heroes of Might and Magic 3, Quake, Silent Hill. So it wasn't a surprise that Blizzard back then didn't want to just farm Warcraft. They took a leap into other projects, and as you can see, it paid off big time. But after creating 2 Diablos and 1 StarCraft, Blizzard finally circled back to Warcraft, and it's important to understand StarCraft wasn't just successful, it was revolutionary. It brought a ridiculous amount of innovations to the RTS genre and had a massive influence on the mechanics of Warcraft 3. But visuals weren't the only big change in Warcraft 3. Unlike the earlier games where you had just 2 factions, Warcraft 3 gave us 4, each with completely unique playstyles. I would even compare each faction to a different instrument in an orchestra, not just different types of guitars, but entirely distinct sound like drums, violins, and brass. They all played the same game, but the way they did it felt totally different. And the maps, they were packed with neutrals, special buildings like shops, mercenary camps, laboratory, also another shops that served all factions, and later in the Frozen Throne, also taverns appeared where you could recruit neutral heroes no faction had access to. On top of that, each race had its own unique shop, adding even more depth and strategy to the game. And the real game changer was the RPG elements. Each faction could recruit 3 heroes, each with unique abilities and 6 slots for artifacts or consumables. No ability overlap here, every hero brought something fresh. You had 3 regular abilities and 1 epic ultimate. Mastering your heroes, leveling them up fast, and picking the right artifacts became the key to winning. The tactical flexibility was so deep, it's insane. And even now, new metas are still being discovered. Just recently, Grabby created a whole new strategy with headhunters based on a viewer request. Even Happy, the guy who's known for being unbeatable with just one style, has been shaking things up and adapting to new strategies. Warcraft 3 is the king of micro-control gameplay, because on the other hand we have StarCraft that is more about macro, controlling multiple bases and fighting at multiple times at the same time, controlling huge armies. Whereas in Warcraft 3 you still need to control your army, but it's significantly less, but the amount of micromanagement of each singular unit is insane. But the most unforgettable part? The story. Even in earlier Warcraft games the plot stood out, but Warcraft 3 took it to another level. It blurred the lines between RTS and RPG, delivering missions that were felt fresh and unique every time. The characters? Absolutely compelling. The stories of Arthas and Illidan alone are masterpieces that pull you in and refuse to let you go. All of this made Warcraft 3 not just a top RTS, it became a legend. It didn't just spark competitive fire and the drive to crush your opponent's base. No, this game blew minds with every detail and made people fall in love with it for so many different reasons. I mean, Warcraft 3 was probably the only strategy game where even in gaming clubs people were hooked on a campaign, when usually all they cared about was the esports. At some point during Warcraft 3 reign, something unexpected happened. A little custom game started to appear more and more. Defense of the Ancients it was called. At first, it was just another fun custom game among thousands of others in Warcraft 3 community, but soon it exploded in popularity, and it didn't take long before Dota wasn't just a custom game, it became the game. People who once spent hours grinding to Warcraft 3 campaign or just battling out on Battle.net against each other just have abandoned it completely. Dota took the most exciting part of Warcraft 3, the hero control, and made it the entire game. And it wasn't just the old school Warcraft players who got hooked. New waves of players poured in, people who have never even touched a single campaign mission, who had no idea who Arthas or Thrall even were. They didn't care about the lore, the factions, or the original game mods. For them, Warcraft 3 wasn't an RTS, it was just the platform for Dota and the other custom maps, Woodman Frenzy, Tower Defense, and FO's Team for Survival, for example. The custom map scene became its own ecosystem, separate from the original game. Dota's rise marked a turning point. Warcraft 3, which started as a revolutionary RTS blending strategy and RPG elements, became the birthplace of an entirely new genre, the MOBA. It's wild to think that from this one game engine, a whole new gaming phenomenon was born. Dota would go on and inspire other games like League of Legends, Heroes of the Nether, Heroes of the Storm, and of course Dota 2. But what does it mean for Warcraft 3 itself? Well, if you look at it like a life of a game, Warcraft 3 started as an ambitious, groundbreaking RTS that refined what strategy games could be. But over time, it evolved into something more. It became a platform, a canvas for creators and modders to bring their own ideas to life. And in doing so, it left an unforgettable mark on gaming history, not just for what it was, but for what it inspired. In a way, Warcraft 3 Legacy isn't just about the game itself, but everything that happened because of it.